Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kevin Stoller. I am the Honors College Assistant Dean for External Relations and Student Engagement. I want to welcome you all to this OSU Alumni Association Honors College Ask Alumni panel. I feel very fortunate to have 4 Honors College alumni joining us today. We have Tucker Cochenour, a 2020 Economics and Political Science graduate, Drew Gibson, a 2018 Biochemistry and Biophysics graduate, Ammara Molvi, a 2020 Public Health graduate, and Tari, a 2008 Biochemistry and Biophysics graduate. They're going to be here to share some insights into the graduate school application process and experience. And our conversation today is going to be moderated by a current Honors College student, Camden Schmidt. And I'll hand it over to Camden now to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Camden. I am in my 3rd and final year at OSU studying environmental economics and policy. And I graduate in the spring, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet. So that's coming quickly. But we can go ahead and get started. I would like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves and share a little bit about their path after Oregon State. And I have a list of names to call on, and we'll kind of randomize it as we go through, so it's not the same order every time. So yeah, let's start with Tucker, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, talk about what you've done since graduation, where you are now. We'll go from there.
Absolutely. My name is Tucker Cochenour. I'm a 3rd year student at the UC Berkeley School of Law. I graduated from the Honors College in June of 2020. I went pretty much directly into law school about a month and a half later. So it's all been kind of a whirlwind since then.
Yeah, let's hear from Drew next.
Sure, thank you. Hi, everybody, I'm Drew. I am a 2018 graduate. I am currently a 3rd year PhD student in logic and philosophy of science at UC Irvine. And yeah, I took 2 gap years between graduating and starting grad school. So I graduated in 2018 and started in 2020. And during those years, I did a little bit of research work at Portland State University, just as an analyst in a lab there. But I also did some non-academic work in the service industry. Happy to talk about that too.
Great. Now, Ammara.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ammara. I graduated in 2020 with a degree in public health. And I'm actually not in graduate school right now, but I am in the process of applying, hopefully. I'm interested in pursuing an MD MPH. So since I've graduated, I've kind of taken some opportunities to grow my skills and get some real world experience before applying and going to grad school. So since I graduated, I did a year of service with AmeriCorps at the Oregon Health Authority in their EMS and trauma systems program. And then I also did an internship at OHSU in their Center for Health Systems Effectiveness. So that was doing research. And then I've also been volunteering with migrant and refugee students, high school students. And then right now I'm a scribe at OHSU.
Great. And lastly, Tari.
Hi, so I'm Tari. I graduated from biochemistry and biophysics in 2008. So been out a little bit longer. I am currently the Assistant Dean for Educational Innovation and Scholarship in the Office of Graduate Education at Harvard Medical School. Right after graduation, like Drew, I took 2 years off or gap years working in a research laboratory as a research assistant before starting graduate school. So I worked in a lab in Boston at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. So I moved out to Boston right after graduating and then just haven't left. I got my PhD in neurobiology from Harvard Medical School. And then after that, I completed an education postdoctoral position, continuing to work with my graduate program, and then have just progressed from there becoming the director of education for the graduate program, and then now moving into the dean's office. So now I work with graduate students across multiple programs as well as just neuroscience.
Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourselves. I would now like to ask the floor for questions. Feel free to write them in the chat or just raise your hands. We'll also ask any questions that you folks submitted in advance. But to kick things off, perhaps the panelists can share when you decided you wanted to go to additional schooling, graduate school, and what motivated you to make that decision. And we can start with Tari this time.
All right. So I actually entered OSU thinking I wanted to go to medical school. So I was pre-med up until my senior year. And it was actually through a combination of experiences. I got involved with undergraduate research very early on. I also had the opportunity to get teaching experience as a teaching assistant for a few of my professors in biochemistry and cell biology while an undergraduate, which was pretty cool. It was actually an honors college course taken fall of my senior year, during which I realized that I didn't actually want to go to medical school. So the honors college class, I can't remember the exact title, but it was essentially kind of an interview class to prep people for largely medical school. Most people in the course were pre-med. And it was in the context of that class that we were asked, why medicine, and to prepare our, mock personal statements and things like that. And it was in that class that I realized I didn't have very good justification for why medicine beyond the fact that I really enjoyed science and learning. So through my mini identity crisis in fall term of my senior year, I was able to reflect on all the things I'd been doing at OSU and realized that I really just enjoyed learning and discovery in the lab and teaching and mentoring. And that was when I started learning about PhD programs. So talking with my mentors and academic advisors, and figured out that that was the path I wanted to take. And as I mentioned, I had already been planning on taking 2 years off before starting medical school at the time. So it wasn't a big switch to, wrench in my plans to switch to graduate school.
Thank you. Can we hear from Tucker next?
Yeah, I decided that grad school would be a good step for me. I think in my second year at OSU, I was at OSU for 3 years. And I think it was just a realization for me that if I wanted to keep on taking my studies, especially in political science and economics further, and if I really wanted to work in those fields, it would be helpful to have some kind of advanced degree. And law school is a really good option for that. And on top of that, there's also, of course, really good coursework in the political science department, including a constitutional law set of courses that also just really helped me realize that I could thrive in an environment like law school.
Thank you. True next.
Yeah. So like Tari, I also came into OSU thinking broadly that I wanted to do pre-med. And I guess the difference where we diverge is that I realized I didn't want to do pre-med relatively early on in like sophomore year. I just started to see basically the same thing as Tari did, which is that I'm much more interested in the science than in the actual, like what would be involved in the actual practice of medicine and being a doctor. And so I learned that by doing undergraduate research, and through the course of doing undergrad research, I started to realize that in the same way, I was really interested in the process of scientific discovery, but I wasn't that into doing it. I didn't enjoy being in the lab as much as I think I needed to enjoy it in order for me to seriously pursue graduate education that involved that kind of stuff. So I decided to pick up a philosophy minor because I was interested in like scientific discovery and just what kind of thing that is. And then I came out of Oregon State with this, combination of training in science and some training in philosophy, and really wanted to keep doing that. And so initially I took gap years because I hadn't figured out whether I wanted to do a PhD that somehow combined these two things. And also, even if I did, I didn't feel sort of ready, to go right into graduate school. You got to apply in your senior year. I did not have my ducks in a row to do that. So I took a couple of years and just kind of worked. This both helped me prepare my application, and it also helped me get more confident in my desire to go and do a PhD. And so I applied to a number of philosophy programs, philosophy PhDs, and in the first cycle did not do well, which means I didn't get in anywhere. And this was, this is largely because I wasn't really tailoring my applications. I wasn't trying to find a good fit. I was just applying to places that seemed like good places to go. And so I'm sure we'll get into that, but I eventually found a program that was sort of just right for me in my second application cycle, and thankfully got in, and then started the PhD in 2020, and then the rest is, been here.
Thank you. And lastly, Ammara.
Yeah, so I have always been interested in medicine, like ever since I was little. And when I got into college, I took all the pre-med courses and did all the kind of pre-med extracurriculars that you're meant to do. And so I really found that medicine was kind of my main interest, but I also came into college undecided. So I didn't know what major I was going to do, but I took an intro to public health class, the honors one. And that one kind of taught me what public health was. And since then, I also really fell in love with public health. So for me, pairing public health with medicine has always kind of been my two passions. And so when I graduated, I always kind of planned to take some gap years, but COVID kind of pushed me farther into doing that. And so I decided to take some time off to get some more public health experience, more real world experience. And yeah, I think kind of like how everybody who said they've taken gap years, it's really important to just kind of solidify what you're interested in and have that time to kind of self-reflect and really make sure that you're going into the field and career that you want to. And so as I have been in my gap years and have kind of taken opportunities in both public health and medicine, it's really solidified that I would really like to do that MD, MPH. And yeah, so I think it's just building off of different experiences has really kind of shaped my decision.
Great. Thank you, everyone. There is a question in chat and quite a few pre-submitted questions about the gap year, so I really appreciate the discussion about that. Maybe we can discuss this a little bit more in depth. There's a question in the chat about gap years. Says, any recommendations on how to use the gap years to be more competitive for the next application cycle? For example, I know that stats are generally required in the first year. Should I take graduate level stats in classes in preparation? I will also be retaking the GRE to try to improve my scores. Any other tips? In addition to that, there was a pre-selected question just about the value of a gap year and how to utilize it effectively in terms of both the gap year and then also using that information in graduate school. So if any of you'd like to just speak broadly about your experience with the gap year and give any insight into how to make it useful and what to spend the time doing in a little bit more specifics, that would be great. And whoever would like to start can certainly do so.
I could start a little bit because I had the experience of gap year as a student myself, and now also being involved in PhD admissions, seeing how students use gap years and kind of what we from the admissions side look for. I will say I'm not super familiar with industrial organizational psychology in particular to this question, but if it is a research-based PhD program, I would say research is really one of the best things you can do during the gap year. A lot of programs generally, for PhD programs at least, are adopting what's called holistic review, graduate review. So kind of looking at applicants, all aspects of their application, grades is one thing, and GRE score, if the programs still require GRE, and research experience. So if you feel like your GPA coming out of college was quite low, and you think that taking courses, to demonstrate that you could take a graduate level course, that can be useful if your grades in, say, the relevant psychology or quantitative courses were relatively low as an undergraduate. But I would say that if it is a research-based PhD program, finding an opportunity to get involved in research during that gap year is one of the most important things you can do. And I think that's one of the most successful strategies for students who enter neuroscience PhD programs, at least, that if they haven't been doing research during the gap years, I don't think it makes them as competitive. So that's for what it's worth. And I will say for myself as a student, having those couple years as research was definitely really strengthened my application. I mean, I had been doing research a lot as an undergraduate, but then, you can never have too much. And so having been able to work full time on a project for a year and a half by the time I was, going through the application cycle was really helpful for me.
Thank you, Tari. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to that question or about more information on their gap year or years?
Yeah, I can speak a bit about my experience and also just the broad advice that I have. Although I think Tari is broadly correct about everything you said, but I'll just add on to it. Well, okay, so a bit about what I did is initially I really wanted to figure out whether this is what I actually wanted to do. So I decided to not take an academic position, not take a research position, or at least not pursue one. It's not like I was getting offers from a bunch of people. But I worked as a baker for a while, and then I worked as a line cook for a while in Portland. And I thought that was really valuable experience. It just kind of gave me a breath from being sort of inside the academic realm, which can be, I think, really useful. Especially if, I don't know, it's just hard to see when you're on the inside. It's sometimes easier to sort of step out of the academic realm and look back in and say, how much of this was I really just intrinsically motivated to do, and how much of this was being in an environment where, there were all these incentives for me to do well at this kind of stuff. And so I was able to figure out that I did really want to go back there. So I got a position at Portland State University doing some biophysics research for a while, and that helped with my application. But okay, that's one half of that's the personal half of the answer. To add a little bit on to what Tari said, I think for me the main difference between my first and second application cycle was not that I got more experience. It was that I had done a lot more research about where I was applying, and I had reached out to particular faculty at the programs I was applying to and gauged their interest in taking me on as a student. And this is maybe this is advice that most people already have taken, but in the first round, I just kind of did it based on places that listed topics which I was interested in. But I do think taking a really fine-grained approach is really worthwhile when it comes to PhD admissions, because fit is so important. And yeah, even I probably sent out 100, maybe 200 cold emails to faculty at programs I was interested in. And most of them, of course, never responded because they didn't have time or they didn't see me as an interesting prospect. But, if you get connected with 10 of those 200 professors and are able to establish that, they said I should apply, they said they would have a spot for me in their lab. If I get in, they can never guarantee that you're going to get in, but just having someone on, having a faculty member who sort of knows your name, will know that your application is this person that they've talked to when it comes up. I think that can be really important. And this will vary dependent on field, but I think that's probably generally true. Fit is really important for PhD admissions.
Yeah, I also wanted to add on to that. I really agree with what Drew is saying, because what I've noticed is a lot of time is that hard skills like your GPA, your MCAT, or your GRE scores, or what you've done to broaden your career or academic aspects, are really just to get your foot in the door, and it's those soft skills that really help kind of elevate yourself and your application, and kind of make you stand out from other people. So that's why I think having a gap year is really important, because you have a lot of time to kind of self-reflect and also pursue certain passions that maybe you didn't get time to in college or things like that. So it's really important to just kind of learn those life intangibles and kind of build yourself up as a person as well. And I think in that same way, like True was saying, it kind of helps you gauge, like, is this school's mission aligning with my own personal goals and personality as well. So yeah, that's why I've also really enjoyed my gap years, is because I've kind of had time to self-reflect and like build myself up as a person. And so yeah, I think that's definitely really important as well.
Great, thank you all. That's a really good segue into the next question.
And before you move on, can I'm sorry to interrupt, but since Tucker's the only one who didn't take a gap year, I'm wondering if he if he's felt any burnout, or any thoughts about that.
I think it's an interesting question, because law school, especially, you see a lot of people enter a bit later. You'll see definitely people enter. I think our median age is like 25 or so. Definitely for some law schools it's later, and that's because people have gone out into industry and gotten experience there. For me, it felt, especially graduating during the pandemic and everything, like I genuinely thought about deferring my offer and taking a year off or something. But I mean, I was sitting in my parents' living room in like May of 2020. It was like, well, if I have this offer, I should take it. And yeah, like to me, it was just the best fit, that I knew that I wanted to go straight through, especially if I could. It's hard though, especially like taking standardized tests like the GRE, the LSAT, the MCAT, any of those, while also studying as an undergrad, can be so draining. And so I would definitely say that people should think long and hard about taking gap years, because they can, if they're considering not, because they can be really beneficial. And I know that it's helped a lot of my peers deal with things like burnout.
Thank you. Yeah, so the next set of questions is about choosing what program you'd like to attend. So how did you go about choosing a school or program, whether you were deciding in undergraduate or during your gap year? And then if you were still in that process, what are the elements that you're considering? We can go ahead and start with True, if that's all right.
Yeah, so I've said a little bit related to this, but I think I can probably add a little bit more helpful info. So like I said, the first time around, I applied to exclusively philosophy PhD programs, and didn't get in anywhere. So I didn't have that problem that time. The second time around, I applied. So I'd kind of a little bit given up on trying to do a PhD that's fundamentally a philosophy PhD. So I had applied to this logic and philosophy of science program as sort of a last ditch attempt. But I had also applied to a cognitive science PhD, and a chemistry PhD and a biomedical engineering PhD, which sounds like a very weird collection of things, but there was a logic to it. But I got in actually at all of these places, and ended up having to sort of choose between not just schools, but also fields like careers. And in the end, the decision was pretty easy for me, because the one I really wanted to do was a philosophy PhD, and I did get into that sort of last ditch attempt, and so I went with that. But it can still be difficult, because you're still trying to weigh both, the value of prestige, the value of like cultural fit, whether you see yourself getting along with the grad student and faculty community at your program. And I don't know, there's a lot of variables to weigh. If I had to try to sort of synthesize one takeaway from my sort of rather weird experience with it, I would say PhDs are really hard to complete for anybody. And knowing that, you should really not underestimate the importance of going somewhere where you're going to feel comfortable and supported, and like it's somewhere where you could see yourself getting through it. Because there are, of course, people, as everybody knows, who get into the top programs and then go there because it's the top program. But for whatever reason, it's just they are not set up to succeed there. They don't fit with the culture of the environment, or the work that they're doing is not really particularly well taken by that particular department or something. And it can be a really bad thing. So I would say it's really worth going to some place where, like, if you have the option between two schools, it's really worth thinking seriously about which place seems like a better fit for you. Because sometimes that can make the difference between finishing the PhD and then not being able to finish the PhD, or finishing the PhD and suffering lots and lots of mental stress. And that's also not a good outcome.
Yeah, can we hear from Tari next?
Yeah, so I want to echo everything Drew was saying, because it is definitely the case that finding programs where there's support structures built into the program and in the institution is really important in whatever context. Building a little bit on the previous discussion about reaching out to individual faculty members, I think that can also be something that, depending on the field that people are going into, and I think psychology is one where it's split. Some programs do actually admit you to an individual faculty member. So you're applying to work with a particular person as opposed to getting admitted to a graduate program. I think some engineering programs are like that as well. So that's a first thing to also ask when you're looking across different programs. If you're in one of those disciplines where it's split, is this a program where I'm applying to work with an individual faculty member or applying to a program? Because if it's working with a specific faculty member and you get admitted to work with that person, that makes, I think, these institutional supports even more important, because you don't have the benefit of trying out different faculty. Whereas, like in the field of neuroscience, for example, the programs almost, uniformly basically have rotations, and you get admitted to programs, not to work with individual people. So you at least get a chance to kind of try people out once you start. But yeah, in terms of generally how I found programs, I identified programs first just by the research interests of the faculty, because students do want to apply to graduate programs where there's at least some semblance of alignment between what they're interested in at that point in time and the faculty there, especially in a program where you do rotate and you try out different labs. But then when it comes down to actually selecting which program you want to go to, I actually advise students that the specific people become less important at that point, especially if you have programs that have a lot of faculty affiliated with them, because your interests very well might change. And I know in at least our program, we also engineer a lot of opportunities, lightning talks with faculty and poster sessions to try to introduce students to a whole bunch of faculty when they first start, to get them intrigued in areas that they maybe didn't think they were interested in to begin with. So to some extent, who you end up working with could be flexible, again, depending on the discipline. But I ended up choosing my graduate program largely based on the student community that was evident during interview weekend. It was very clear that the students knew each other, that they seemed happy, that they all had good things to say about the program. And I will say that my experience then going through the program, it very much lived up to that. So it wasn't something that they were faking, but I think that sense of community was a telltale sign of a really positive atmosphere. Whereas some of the other places where I interviewed, current students would be meeting each other for the first time at events, or we'd only see the junior students, and the older students in the program were nowhere to be seen. And so I kind of took that as maybe less positive. So that was something in particular I looked for.
Thank you. Yeah, can we hear from Tucker next?
Yeah, I'd say that I honestly come from this with law school. It's an entirely different beast compared to like PhD programs. There's just different factors that play into it. With law schools, there's a pretty rigid concept of like what like the top law schools are. It hasn't changed for decades. And pretty much the rule of thumb is to go to the best one that you can while incurring the least amount of debt that you can. On top of that, though, there's other factors. Law schools, very like other pro schools, are very or professional schools are very geographic based for outcomes. So essentially, since after law school you take a bar exam, you're kind of locked into that state. You want to make sure that you're going to go to a place that has people that are focused in areas they want to be focused in, and specifically focused in geographic areas you want to be focused in. I grew up on the West Coast. I grew up in Oregon. I love like the idea, like the West Coast culture and everything. And there's just a better legal market in California. So for me, it came down to just like, well, I guess I'm moving down to California. I applied across the country. And I think I would have been happy anywhere, but I think I got really lucky ending up at a school, especially applying during COVID and everything, ending up in like both applying and making a decision during COVID, ending up at a school that has a strong culture and like a really strong commitment to public service. If anyone was thinking about law school, that's what I recommend, is find a program that has diverse diverse opportunities in terms of I've been lucky enough to be able to both get a lot of practice in corporate law, which I'm going to, but also certain areas of public service law. So yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it's very different compared to PhD programs, but I think that's pretty much how it worked out for me. I was mostly just wanting to stay on the West Coast.
Thank you. And lastly, Ammara.
Yeah, so medical school also is very different from PhD or law schools. So for medical schools, it's totally different in the way that you have to consider things. So a lot of times you have to look at the curriculum that the school is providing, which I'm sure is actually relevant in any other professional program as well. But you have to consider things like when do clinicals start? What's their match rate? So, when you graduate medical school, how likely are you to actually match into a residency and actually practice as a physician? And then there's also that prestige associated with medical schools as well. However, I don't think it's as competitive or as important as probably law school. I think a lot of the current medical students that I've kind of been talking to and stuff like that, they've really emphasized looking at what the school is doing to support students, because medical school is very, very difficult and it has a lot of burnout and things like that. So students want to also look at kind of what support programs schools are offering as well. And then as well as, since I'm kind of in the process of considering what graduate programs to go to, I'm looking at things like location, like would I be around family? Would I be far from family? Cost as well. So, like, are you getting scholarships? Is there certain financial aid as well? And then because I'm also interested in an MD MPH program, there are schools that offer that dual degree. So you like take a year off in the middle of your medical school to complete that MPH. Or there's also schools that don't offer that, but you can take time off to complete an MPH at a different school. So I think it's just really important to consider I think the most important thing that if I had to really think, it would be to consider what is meeting your personal goals and which schools have the same kind of mission statement as your goals. That's probably what I would consider.
Great, thank you. And there was a question specifically for you, Ammara, and I think it would be a good segue is, how do you think your majors and minors and other experiences have prepared you for your medical school applications?
Good question. I think like coursework offers a limited scope, but I think really what has helped me is having that degree in public health has really helped me get positions after school that have helped me get experiences in my gap year. So I think that degree helps you get your foot in the door to do things like a research internship and things like that. So yeah, I would say that what's really helped me is kind of what opportunities I took advantage of in college that weren't really related to academics. So I also did research. You know, the honors thesis is a really great way to get that research experience and have something like concrete that like this is what I did, and that was my research. So that helped me kind of get involved with research after undergrad. And then I also spent time volunteering at the free clinic in Corvallis as well, and that helped me kind of get a different perspective on medicine and helped me get more experience in public health, which helped me in things like my a year of service with AmeriCorps or just volunteering as well. So yeah, I think taking advantage of things outside academics like extracurriculars was really helpful to pursue things in my gap years.
Great, thank you for that. Going to one of the questions from the chat. Has any of our selected panel grad programs on factors other than the usual factors, proximity to family, support for mental health disabilities, state safety net programs, desired geography, any advice on how to factor in these other concerns? And whoever has an idea can start off, no order here.
I can speak to a bit of at least my experience with it. Everything you've listed are important factors. Like they're just straight up important. The tangibles in terms of prestige and program strengths are obviously also important, but they're not sort of on some upper echelon of factors that you should be caring about. And then these are all factors which you should somehow not be caring about. Like, as I was saying before, you have to be able to see yourself succeeding there, and location, support from proximity to family, all of these things are going to play into that in really direct ways. In terms of how to balance all of these factors, it's going to kind of necessarily be a really personal process for you. Like I mentioned that I had also applied to a chemistry program and a biomedical engineering program, and I applied to these largely because they were close to home for me. And I had a long-term partner at the time who was kind of tethered to the Northwest. And so we were really trying to make it work so that I could do a PhD like I wanted, like I wanted to for my career, but do it in a way that, didn't entirely disrupt all of our lives. And at that point, like deciding between doing a chemistry PhD in Oregon and doing a philosophy PhD in California, Southern California, it was really hard to make that decision because all of these factors were pulling me in different directions. And that's, like there's going to be no one good answer for everyone to follow. But for me, in the end, it was more important that I pursued the career that I wanted in philosophy than for me to be close to family, than me to, have this convenience of being near my partner. I just couldn't see myself doing a chemistry PhD and taking that entire career on at the expense of this. So it's tough, and there's going to be no optimal solution. You're likely going to have several options open to you with no clear differentiator between them. It's just going to come down to introspection, and it's tough. It's very tough. But yeah, don't feel like you shouldn't be considering those things because they're like improper or not relevant. They're totally relevant. And they probably feel relevant, you know, yeah, there's no denying that.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to that question? All right, we can go ahead and move on. This is another question from the Q&A. Would you recommend completing a master's before applying for a PhD? Specifically, Oregon State has an accelerated master's program. Would you recommend partaking in this or applying straight for a PhD? And then they left the comment, I'm specifically interested in an engineering PhD. And again, whoever would like to start with this one can, if whoever has thoughts or recommendations.
So again, there, I think it comes to looking into the specific programs. So engineering, I know, works a little bit differently than, so my frame of reference is biomedical PhD programs. I believe it's pretty common for people to get master's degrees and then get a PhD in engineering. So if they've already accounted for that, like if getting the master's then sets you up for a faster PhD, or if it provides that necessary experience that will set you up to be a more competitive applicant for PhDs, then I think that can be a really good path to go, kind of another version of a gap year, so to speak. In biomedical PhD programs, if anyone's on the call, like you want to do neuroscience or biology or something like that, while master's programs can get you that research experience, you often have to pay tuition for a master's program, and PhD programs in the biological sciences, at least, don't grant you credit for completing a master's. So you go and do your 2 years master's, you've paid a lot of money in tuition, you then apply to a PhD program and they say, okay, now you're back to square one. So it doesn't actually shorten, in most cases, the PhD itself. And you're still going to have to go through the core coursework and things like that. So in that case, that's why in the biomedical realm or biological sciences realm, spending that time working in a research lab, the research part is what's really important, and you can do that in a way where you're getting paid for that work as opposed to paying tuition. But it really does depend on the specific field, and I do think engineering might be different in that regard. So that could be something you could reach out to different PhD programs that you're looking at to say, if I entered in with a master's, does that get me anything, essentially, in so many words.
Any other thoughts on this question? All right, I think we can ask now, what elements of your OSU experience have been most valuable to you since graduation? For this one, we'll start with Ammara.
I think I talked about it a little. For me, I think it was things I did outside of the classroom, like getting those experiences with those extracurriculars. The honors thesis was really helpful. And I think that also helps to figure out what you don't like as well. For example, I did research in a wet lab doing like really scientific sort of research, and I found that wasn't really for me. And then I was able to do my thesis in something totally public health related. And so that helped me realize, that I really love public health and things like that. But I think inside the classroom, it's really helpful just to build connections with your professors, with other students in your class as well. For me, I really felt like I met a lot of people who thought differently than me, and who thought similarly to me. So that was kind of helpful in challenging myself to think certain ways, and also just being around people who had similar goals as me as well. So I think those were probably what I would say for that.
Thank you. Can we hear from Tari now?
Yeah, so I agree with Ammara that the thesis was, for me, one of the most useful experiences and valuable as an undergraduate. Not so much maybe for saying this is for figuring out this is what I know I want to do, because at that point I think I was pretty bought into that concept. But then when I actually went into graduate school, I felt very empowered, having gone through the process, even though on a smaller scale, but having gone through the process of I've written a thesis, I've defended a thesis, and so I actually felt very strong going into graduate school with that experience. I also think that really just having the opportunity and to, first of all, get involved in research and teaching. Like I said, for me, those were the two components that really laid the foundation for what I wanted to do, and ended up sculpting my interests while I went through OSU, as well as, of course, the Honors College class that crystallized everything for me. And then I know there are some future questions that really talk about mentorship, but the mentorship relationships that I was lucky to have as an undergraduate at OSU really were formative in terms of not only sculpting the next step for me, but in the years since. I mean, I still am using my mentors from undergrad, their friends, and we still chat, and throughout many years, even beyond me finishing my PhD, my OSU mentors have continued to be influential in my career and my life. So that's another key aspect of my experience at OSU that was really important.
Thank you. Now for True.
Yeah, this is kind of tough because originally I was going to say the Honors College thesis, and then I was going to, after Ammara said that, I was going to say research and teaching, but then Tari said that. So I would like to echo all of those things. I also got to do a little undergrad teaching assistant experience, which was really helpful for me because teaching is often a really big part of grad school. You're probably going to TA, and if you hate teaching or something, it's important to know. I really liked it, and so it really helped me feel confident that I would enjoy that aspect of the career path. But since those answers were taken, I guess I'll say it's related, but I think just doing undergrad research, specifically the aspect of it that involves being in a community of researchers. I think getting a sense of what that is like can be really valuable, or was really valuable to me, right? Like knowing whether you like the day-to-day thinking through research problems and designing experiments or whatever, that's important, and doing undergrad research will really help with that. But I think it's also important just to sort of get a feel for what it's like to help people out on their projects, to get help from people who know more about certain things than you do. I think that's like a really lovely part of doing research, is that you don't do it. It's not like you're doing it in isolation. You are part of this community of people, generally nerds, people who are interested in the kind of stuff that you are. And that's pretty rare outside of academia to find. So if you haven't had the chance to do undergraduate research, it might still be something that's worthwhile just for that aspect. But of course, for all the sort of standard aspects too, of getting the experience of what it takes to do scientific research or whatever kind of research it is. But yeah, all of those things are my answer.
Thank you. And then lastly, Tucker.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like there's a lot left on the table for me to say. I'd echo everything else that was already said. The thesis is such a special process, especially in the econ and poli-sci programs. Those are pretty small programs, and it can be hard to get involved with research at OSU in some of the softer sciences. So like having that connection with my professors and my mentor was really key. Gave me something to not go crazy about, since I wrote that entire thing between March 2020 and May 2020. And I think the thesis is also nice because it involves like kind of like it crystallized what I'd learned at OSU, and it also gave me an opportunity to kind of bring together a bunch of information, kind of like what True was saying, seeing yourself as one in a community of researchers and seeing how your work can kind of add to the global knowledge. Found that really rewarding, and there's so much writing in law school. So it's really helpful to have some big writing under your belt to begin with. I think there's other aspects too. There's great courses to take at OSU. Honors College course is fantastic because they give you there's not that many econ poli-sci courses in the Honors College, or at least there wasn't when I was there. Maybe it's changed in the past few years. So I took some really random courses on really random subjects in the Honors College so I could get my credits. I think I learned about water policy and things like that. It's a great opportunity to dip your toes into so many different areas. And when you get to law school, you have to figure out what you want to do fast because of the hiring cycles. And so it was good to know, okay, I can grab this from here and this from here, and then I can create a career this way. Kind of having that skill and building that up from the interdisciplinary approach in the Honors College and OSU, it was helpful. So yeah, I think I appreciate that.
Great, thank you. And I want to be mindful of everyone's time, so I have one more question for you all. Do you have any tips just in general for applying for graduate school or getting into graduate school? And then do you have any regrets along the way or things you wish you would have known before you applied? And for this one, just feel free to chime in.
I'll say something that I think is just a consolidation of something I said before about finding fit. I think it's really easy to feel like if you're not successful in grad school applications, it's probably because you're not good enough or you don't have the qualifications. I think that is almost certainly not the case for almost everybody applying to graduate school. I think pretty much everybody is qualified. The hard part is that, think about it from the admissions officers or the admissions committee. They know almost nothing about this giant stack of applications. It's such an information sparse process for them that it's almost certainly the case that if you don't get in somewhere where it seemed like you should have, it's just because they weren't able to see who you are and what your strengths are for whatever reason. So I think for most people applying, the most important thing to do is to leverage and communicate your skills and interests in a way that will really come across. That is a really hard task. That's hard to do. But I think that is the thing that most people should be focusing on, because you are probably already really impressive. And it's just getting that across to someone who has about 2 minutes to read your application is really, really hard. But that's, I think, focusing on that, because that is the task, right? It's not so much making yourself impressive as it is communicating your accomplishments in a really abridged manner to someone who has already read 15 applications in the last 30 minutes. It's hard, but if you kind of try to get into their mindset, I think that can help you see how best to build your own application.
And then I guess I'll just say for anyone going into research-based PhD programs, and again, my frame of reference is biological sciences, biomedical sciences, getting research experience, whatever way you can. And to some extent, it doesn't matter the size of the research experience. The most important part is how intellectually involved you can make yourself in the research experience. So some people say, I don't have the ability to do full-time research at this point, or there was a question in the chat about what if I'm having to do unpaid or kind of on the side. And I would say you can still make a lot out of those experiences. We talk about for applicants, we're often looking to discern if someone was quote unquote a pair of hands in the lab, which means they were doing the work, but they're not thinking like a scientist, versus those who it's clear from the essays, from the information they put forward, that they were thinking about the science. So you can be doing the exact same task in lab and it can be pretty mundane, but how you approach it and how you are able to write about it in your application, building on what True just said of how you actually depict yourself and your application materials, it can make a big difference. So that's what I tell students who might be frustrated with kind of the opportunities or limitations in their current research experience, if those exist, is you can still make a lot out of this. Just try to approach it with a very intellectually engaged, I'm a scientist mindset. So that would be my advice for people going into PhD programs, scientific ones.
Yeah, I would echo exactly what True was saying, is that don't sell yourself short and definitely own all the things that you've done, because you might not think that you're as impressive or, you know, comparing yourself to other people, but you probably are. And another thing is just like work on your writing skills, because I feel like if you're not able to communicate all that, like Tari and True were saying, you know, you have all those qualifications, but you really need to be able to tell somebody that, and tell somebody who you are. So I think that's also really important, is just have people read over your essays, read books, just work on writing, and yeah.
Yeah, I would add into just like two of those points that were just said. First, from Ammara, I would say, like, don't just work on your writing, work on your reading. Like, any grad school is going to involve such an insane amount of reading. And so if you're at OSU, just like trying to find ways you can really engage further with source materials can be so helpful. And then to True's point, I would say, like, don't just think about like leveraging your strengths are so important in your not just in your applications, but also if you are applying to certain types of programs, knowing what those like programs care about. With like with law schools, they really care about your hard stats. Like, and so you need to make sure that your hard stats are as high as possible. For other programs, like, they might care way more about your research experience. But like, if I'm applying to a law school, they don't care about my research experience very much. Like, that's just the truth. And so like knowing to like how to tailor things like your resume, your application materials, like that's research that you need to do. And if you don't, like, you could end up having like a cycle that leaves you with a bad taste in your mouth.
Thank you all. Are there any other thoughts or anything you'd like to share with us? If not, then I think this brings us to the end.
Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you really for a great discussion. Ammara, Tari, Tucker, True. It was really great for you to spend the time, and you shared such interesting tips and advice. And Camden, great job. Thank you for hosting us today. I hope everybody has a great afternoon.
Hi, everyone.